Hello, beauties. I'm sure you can guess which palette this is. You all gave me the idea to dupe this one. As always, we're going to do swatch of every single shade. I have some alternatives here for you all. Don't forget a thumbs up if you enjoy these kinds of videos. Let's jump in. A couple of things I mentioned in every duping video. It's very difficult to know what these shades really look like unless you own the original palette. I'm going primarily by the photos Fantasy Cosmetica posted on their Instagram. I'll post the photos up so you know which photos I'm playing off of. And this is because a lot of the photos available online are modified or enhanced. The saturation is changed. The hues are changed. Something that might be cool toned in reality looks like a warm toned, and so on, which is exactly why I picked some alternatives that we're going to get into. Also, not to forget, these shades generally look deeper in person than the swatches that you see on the screen. Let's get started swatching. For our first shade, I have two options: Sunny from Give Me Glow, and as you can see, I've never used this, which is why we're using it, and another shade from the Best Mattes palette of Bella Beauté Bar. This one is a little grungier, more green. Again, this is one of those shades that in some photos it was a yellow, in some photos it was a green, which is why I picked two options for you all. For our next shade, I picked Burnish, which is one of the deep-based jeweled multichromes of Clionadh. I've noticed that these black-based multichromes I don't really use very often, which is exactly why I chose to pick this one for this palette. In some photos, this shade looks sort of like an ancient coin gold, and in some photos it looks green, and picking a multichrome that goes green to gold is fantastic. And you can see this shade even has a little bit of bronze from some angles. This shade is a shade I haven't used very much, as you can see from the embossing, which is exactly why we're using it today, because it's such a gorgeous shade. This is Fairytale from the Fairytale Fairies palette of Simply Posh. And although I'm not the biggest fan of Simply Posh's shimmer quality, I love their mattes. Look at this. So pigmented and such a beautiful and unique shade. The next shade was difficult to dupe because it was hard to know what this shade really looks like. And for it, I picked Sculpture as an option from Clionadh, and Helix Nebula as another option from Terra. There is also Scream, which is a shade from Looxi Beauty that I used when duping the Haunted Mansion palette of ColourPop. That video is not up yet, but that shade could also be used here. I swatched that shade in that video. If you want to check that video out when it's available, I'll put the link when that video becomes available below. The reason for these two shades was because from the photos available on the site, this shade looked like it was mostly aubergine, and that could possibly have a green shift, and both of these shades have that. Now, Sculpture definitely has a much more prominent green shift than Helix Nebula, and instead Helix Nebula has a much more purpley aubergine shift, instead going to a very prominent gold shift. These are the two shades in the shade with no light. As you can see, the green shift is much more diffused here. To dupe our next shade, I picked another shade from Fairytale Fairies. This is Woodlands. By the way, beauties, my nails are Kiss nails. These are press-ons that I bought last year, and I think I saw these at TJ Maxx this year. And this is my other hand. I love that the designs are different. Here's Woodlands swatched. Such a beautiful, warm-toned, deep green matte. I picked Tarte from Berry Icy palette from Simply Posh for our next shade. This is a beautiful deep burgundy shade. Beauties, again, these are usually deeper in person than what you see on camera. I'm pretty sure you could pick something from the Orchid You Not palette of ColourPop if you don't have this palette and have that one instead. Our next shade looks like a pink magenta base with a blue glaze on top. For this one, I picked Cherry Bomb from Looxi. Cherry Bomb looks exactly like what this shade looks like from the swatches. And here's Cherry Bomb in the shade. It looks a lot more purple in the shade. Our next shade looks like a very, very deep gray with a hint of purple. And that is exactly what Officer looks like from Sydney Grace. I feel like I've talked about how much I enjoy this shade in the past, so I'm not going to keep repeating that in every video. This next shade truly looked like an enigma. It was hard, very hard, to know what it looks like from the photos and even the swatches. And that's why I picked 3 distinctly different options, whichever fancies your boat. First one is Snickerdoodle from Looxi Beauty. Next one used to be called Will-o-the-wisp that Clionadh renamed to Myrrh. And last is Cosmic Dancer from Terra. Snickerdoodle represents most what this shade should actually look like. From photos, it looks like it doesn't have a very deep base, and then it has a glaze that goes green to blue, and Snickerdoodle is kind of that. Definitely much more than Myrrh / Will-o-the-wisp, and much more so than Cosmic Dancer. But as I said, whichever of these rock your boat, use that one. And here are the shifts in the shade. Scuba Diver from Sydney Grace looks like a perfect representation of our next matte shade. Such a beautiful muted teal shade. Reptile from Copacetic looks like a true embodiment of this next shade. From the swatch photos online, this shade looks like it's comprised of tiny glitters, and Reptile is exactly that. Again, beauties, in this channel, we do not use glitter that is not safe for the eye. And this is Reptile in the shade. I absolutely love this next shade, and I think incorporating a bright pastel yellow in this palette goes very well with the other shades in the palette. However, it was hard to find a dupe for this one, and for it I had to go again into the Best Mattes palette from Bella Beauté Bar. Our 2 possible options for this shade is Running on E from Copacetic and Arabian Nights from Terra. There is also Northeaster that you could use from Sydney Grace. I use a lot of Sydney Grace, and I've definitely used Northeaster in past duping videos. You can check those videos out if you want to see it swatched, but that's why I didn't try that one here. Running on E is a tiny bit more teal, and Arabian Nights is a tiny bit more blue, but honestly on your eyes, nobody's gonna see the difference. For our next shade, again, we have 2 options. First one is from Copacetic. This is VI or Roman numeral 6. And the other option is Multiverse from Terra. This one I've used before a lot. As you can see, it even has a giant dent inside. 2 shades are extremely similar. They both are super shifty and glittery looking. Only that Multiverse looks like a deeper version of VI. So pick whichever one you think goes with your version of the palette. And the swatches of these 2 shades in the shade. These are the 2 options for our next shade. We have Granny Smith from Sydney Grace and Extra Guac from Give Me Glow. Granny Smith is a little bit more muted, and it looks like it has a little bit of cream or ochre shade mixed in it, and Extra Guac on the other hand is super bright. Granny Smith looks more like the shades in the swatch photos of the palette, but hey, this is your custom made. So if you want to go bright and high saturation, Extra Guac is an option, and it's a beautiful shade. These are the 2 options I picked for our next shade. One is a very deep teal, and this one is Thrilled from Sydney Grace, and the other one is a very, very deep green, and this is Chlorophyll from Copacetic. In the swatch photos available online of this palette, this shade looked anything from very deep green to black. And you all know that I get hives when I hear matte black. So definitely black was going to be out of the question, although I'm pretty sure you can find a black from one of your ColourPop palettes and just pop it here if that's what you want, if you don't have a black single. Alternatively, you can also use deep browns like Espresso Deep from Sydney Grace, which I used when duping Gargoyle palette. Or Fried Oreo from Pretties for Your Face. That's also a super, super deep brown. Yeah, so there are a lot of options you can pick, but I thought a very deep teal would definitely go here instead. Beauties, as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget a thumbs up. I've already done one look at least with this palette in my to buy or not to buy. That video is going to be recommended to you on the screen. I also have a duping playlist that's going to be recommended to you on the screen about now, so you can check those videos out. Love you all. Have an awesome day, and until next time, bye.